All right, so now we'll be talking about Module 3, which looks at both how to resolve ethical issues and competence. So the very first section of the ethics code is resolving ethical issues. It's basically like, hey, if you have an ethical issue, if someone else in your life seems to be having an ethical issue, this is how to resolve it. And when I go over these, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail because Fisher does that really well. But I'm going to kind of, in a lot of times, just be like, these are a do this, don't do this, right? So number one, don't misuse work, right? Don't do therapy on someone who's not a client. Don't falsely cite something, things along those lines. I think 1.02 and 1.03 are both really helpful, thinking about what if there's conflicts between the ethics code and the law? How do you navigate that, right? How do you not get in trouble with the law yourself? And then one that's really important for applied psychologists is, what if there's a conflict between your ethics and organizational demands? That one's usually easier, right? Usually you're like, I'm standing on my ethics, and here's why. Then there's informal resolution of violations. You don't have to report every violation to the APA. A lot of times you can just kind of work it out. Maybe you call out a colleague, and then they say, you know what, you're right. And they do it better. There is a whole code for telling you, though, how to report ethical violations, and one is it your obligation to do so, right, as someone with psychology training. Again, yes, no, yes, cooperate with ethics committees, and that could be APA's ethics committee, but a lot of times it's going to be your state licensing board ethics committee. Don't make improper complaints. Don't make something up, right? Don't blow stuff out of proportion. That could be handled informally. And then don't discriminate against whistleblowers or against people who have complaints against them, right? Especially if those turned out to be false. There's a really nice application example in the Hamilton and Slatton reading on Blackboard. But how can we apply this to everyday life? Again, these are going to come from the Hatcher and Joaquin Jackin, I'm not actually sure how to pronounce it, book. I want to be as honest as possible and not misrepresent myself and my knowledge. So they talk a lot about work-life balance and how this is a really important application to life. And I think it's really important in the modern day, right? Where a lot of, all homes, right, have to have two working parents to support kids, just given the state of the economy. And they talk about spillover and how, and this is when your work and your life can bleed together, or events from your life can bleed into your work. Or even, they don't talk about this as much, but what if you bring your work home and that interferes with your home life? So they talk about caregiver and relationship issues and how those can negatively impact how you're working well or not in the workplace. And one of the things that's really important here is that a lot of folks are now in what's called the sandwich generation, where they might be caring for their own children, whether young kids, teenagers, what have you, and then their parents are also aging. And they might have to become caregivers to them, as unfortunately those folks develop health issues, develop dementia, things along those lines. That's a lot of pressure, right? That's a lot of responsibility. Should you go to work if your personal problems will spill over? Mental health days are a thing, right? And people should probably take them, but not everyone has the ability to do so. Right? If you're a shift worker, you basically just don't get paid if you don't go to work, if you don't have any sick days or anything like that. So this becomes really tough. And one of the things that struck me from this chapter is the fact they talked about how people worry about doctors, mechanics, right? People in their lives they go to, what would happen if they had spillover? And how would that affect how your car got fixed or not, or how you got fixed or not, right? And so they talk about people trying to just leave it at the door, but we know from Freud and beyond, right? And those of you who know me know I'm not the biggest Freud fan, but like one of the things he talked about is like repression doesn't work, right? It's going to come bubbling up. You can't just always leave it at the door. We're human. We have memories and feelings, right? And one of the things that's really important is acknowledging it. If you need to seek help, get therapy, reach out to friends and family for help, things along those lines. The second section of the ethics code standards is competence. And this is really about knowing what you should or should not try to do based on what you're trained to do. So knowing the boundaries of your competence. So for example, all of you are wonderful, lovely, educated people, but following this master's program, you will not be competent to do therapy. In fact, you will not even be able to get licensed because we haven't covered that material. I'm not licensed. I chose to teach and focus on research, right? And so we don't have the proper faculty in place to even train you all to do that. There is an exception, however. So let's say someone was suicidal. I'm not licensed, but I'm the person in the moment, right? I could help them, right? I'm not doing therapy. I'm kind of doing emergency first aid, but I can help them. And in fact, because unfortunately that's a situation that might come up, I've actually gotten myself additional training. I did the assist suicide first aid training. And that's a really important part of competence is 2.03. Yes, maintain your competence. And that would include continuing education, keeping up the scientific literature. If you're in forensic psychology, keeping up with the laws in your area and the case law, right? Things along those lines. Our bases for scientific and professional judgment should be based on the science of psychology, right? So we should be pulling from research on therapy, research on what works in a variety of situations. Now, if we have supervisees, if we're going to delegate work to other people, and that might be, if I was licensed in a PhD program and I'm supervising someone and I have them do an assessment, right? That might be I am assessing how they're assessing, essentially. And I'm giving them feedback and I'm making sure everything seems accurate before they present the results to the client. But it could also be just in the workplace. I want to delegate a test. Do I give it to that intern on day one when they have no idea what they're doing? No, ethically, I shouldn't if I don't train them first, right? And then personal problems and conflicts, basically like not letting those get in the way. A lot of the spillover stuff we were just talking about, right? Getting your own support and care when you need it. There's 2 great Blackboard readings about consultation and competence because that's more of a fuzzy area. And I think it's an area where a lot of applied folks will end up going in the next few years. So worth reading for sure. What are areas where you might need to seek additional training to gain competence? Well, if you are a clinical psychologist, it might be providing services via telehealth or other online modalities. It might be treating a new age level. I'm an adult psychopathologist. I never treated a client younger than 12, and I shouldn't even have been treating her, to be perfectly honest. Like, my main youngest client ever was 17 because I was trained on treating adults. But also, let's say you're in the workplace and you've only worked with middle-aged adults. And now someone who's 70, who might have dementia, comes in. You might need to research more, or maybe someone comes in with a new ADA issue that you need to think about. You might need to research more, get another training to make sure you're accommodating them. If you're going to be called into a legal setting, you better as heck look everything up, get yourself up to scratch, get really competent on what you need to present, right? If you want to give an assessment and you've been trained on the old version and then they updated it and it's really different, you probably need additional training. I've been thinking I need to seek out additional training just to teach the WAIS, which is the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, because they've updated it. And I just need to know the differences. You also want to be thinking about evidence-based practices and making sure that you are getting the training to know that you're doing what is cutting edge, what works, what has research behind it. And then the boundaries of your competence. You need to know your role and adhere to those boundaries. This is obviously not only ethical, but keeps you safe legally, right? And this applies across almost any profession. If you can imagine nursing, dentistry, right? Even people in marketing, right? Maybe shouldn't be trying to like make a flyer that advertising would do better, or they're graphic artists, right? And then continuing education, as I mentioned, to maintain that competence, and also being open to learning new things and gaining new competencies as the opportunities arise. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know, and that's a sign of intelligence, right? That's part of being an educated person. And you should use collaboration, referral, and supervision if you are outside of your competence. So, for example, if you're working as a HR professional and someone comes to you and basically starts using you for therapy, you need to be like, hold up, this is not what I'm qualified for, but maybe we have an employee assistance program. Here is their number, go contact them, right? You get free therapy. And then we need to always be thinking about information literacy, digital literacy, media literacy. This is so important that our department teaches a whole course on scientific literacy to our undergraduates. It's so, so important. Alrighty, so that is this module. I hope that you enjoyed diving on in and starting to think about the actual ethics code.